He arrived without fanfare. No insignia, no medals, merely a creased letter and a weathered jacket that had outlasted most of the personnel who brushed past him. Security directed him to wait by the wall. They never scanned his credentials, never inquired about his identity. To them, he was just another aging visitor. Yet behind that unassuming demeanor stood a warrior who once commanded men through operations the government never acknowledged. And when the four-star general whose life he had saved discovered he'd been relegated to the sidelines, a single call to Pentagon command halted everything. What unfolded next will stay with you forever. Welcome to Honor Chronicles, where narratives of sacrifice and gratitude find their voice. Let's reveal the remarkable truth. Sir, I need you to step aside. This is a restricted area. The instruction came from a young Army captain, professional, courteous, and practiced. He wasn't attempting to be discourteous, simply fulfilling his responsibilities. The entrance queue stretched long, scanners hummed steadily, and the last complication he needed was an unscheduled visitor disrupting the flow. The elderly gentleman before him offered no resistance. He simply retreated 2 quiet paces and positioned himself near the frigid marble barrier, tucking his correspondence back into the inner pocket of his coat. The procession continued flowing around him. No one spared him a second glance. The Pentagon's visitor pavilion vibrated with preparations. The occasion marked Leadership Recognition Day for promising military officers, an invitation-only ceremony celebrating exceptional young commanders across all branches. The sort of gathering that attracted stars on epaulettes, immaculate uniforms, and memorable addresses. The kind of event where you were either anticipated or invisible. Walter Harmon wasn't on the expected registry. He had arrived before dawn, well ahead of the incoming attendees. Attired modestly in pressed tan slacks, a light button-up shirt, and a mahogany leather aviator jacket with frayed cuffs and a shoulder tear, mended years ago by hand. He wore no decorations. He had no need for them. He had donned polished, yet scuffed leather footwear, the soles worn thin through decades of faithful service. One hand clutched a folded envelope, edges yellowed with age. Inside lay a handwritten invitation bearing the official emblem of the Department of Defense. The signature at the bottom read, General Raymond Foster. This wasn't a standard RSVP request. It was a personal summons, but such details meant nothing to Captain Alex Brennan. Brennan supervised credential verification. His tablet displayed an organized alphabetical roster of attendees, each matched with digital identification, photography, QR verification, and security clearance designation. No Walter Harmon appeared anywhere. No badge, no scan, no record. So Brennan had followed standard procedure. He'd apologized with formal politeness, informed the senior citizen he must have received outdated information, and requested he wait outside the entrance queue just until confirmation arrives. 30 minutes had elapsed since then. Brennan had continued processing guests. Walter remained stationary. The breeze cut sharper near the wall. It sliced silently from an oblique angle, penetrating Walter's collar. He remained motionless. His posture remained impeccable, hands positioned at his sides, expression serene yet vigilant. He stood like someone accustomed to waiting. Several attendees noticed his presence. They simply assumed he didn't belong. A junior lieutenant in dress uniform whispered something to his companion. Both snickered. Building maintenance probably, or Veterans Affairs outreach. Walter caught the remark, but never flinched. He'd endured worse criticisms. Besides, they weren't entirely mistaken. He did spend mornings sweeping floors and arranging furniture at a local veterans center 3 days weekly, voluntarily. Nobody had requested his assistance. He simply appeared and completed the tasks. No identification badge, no acknowledgement, merely quiet dedication beneath an aged jacket. The security queue advanced steadily. Dozens of gleaming shoes, dozens of insignias, stripes, and decorations. Nobody glanced backward. Nobody questioned why he remained unmoved. Walter kept his gaze fixed ahead. Through the transparent entrance, he glimpsed the auditorium's outer lobby. Banners suspended from the ceiling celebrated the military's next generation. He harbored no resentment. He simply wondered if they remembered there had been generations preceding their own. Nearby, Sophia Martinez, a civilian administrative assistant, arranged program materials at the welcome table. She glanced upward, noticed the elderly man stationed near the wall. She'd observed him upon arrival, assuming he belonged to logistics or catering services, but something about his bearing caught her attention. She couldn't divert her gaze. He wasn't disoriented, wasn't employed, wasn't pleading for admission. He was anticipating, and within his stillness resided purpose. Sophia began moving toward him, but Captain Brennan intercepted her path. "Hey," Brennan said, gesturing toward her clipboard. "We need the seating arrangements confirmed before General Foster arrives. Don't concern yourself with that individual. Security's aware. He lacks clearance." Sophia hesitated. "Did he explain who extended his invitation?" Brennan shrugged. "Presented a letter. No verification code. Age document. Nothing official, yet he persists in waiting. Then he demonstrates patience." Brennan departed and Sophia glanced back toward the man against the wall. He hadn't retreated beyond the perimeter. Walter shifted position slightly. His hip throbbed, but he refused to sit. Not yet. He observed the line diminish, watched staff escort the final VIPs inside, noticed 3 junior officers chuckling at something displayed on a smartphone. He reached within his jacket, extracted the correspondence again. It had grown delicate now, creased where his thumb had pressed too firmly. He reviewed the opening line for the 6th time that morning. "Mr. Harmon, your attendance at this year's ceremony would personally honor me. General Raymond Foster." Walter refolded it and continued waiting. Inside the auditorium, the master of ceremonies mounted the platform. A spotlight tracked his movement. "Distinguished guests," he began, "thank you for joining this special commemoration of excellence and distinction. Today we celebrate the future leadership of our armed services." Applause followed. Rows of young officers straightened their posture. Cameras flashed. A Marine ensemble performed softly near the auditorium's rear. Somewhere among the 3rd row, General Foster's assistant leaned forward and murmured, "Still no confirmation on Mr. Harmon." General Foster rotated slightly, brows furrowed, gaze penetrating. He surveyed the chamber once. Then again, his jawline tightened. He addressed his assistant. "Where is he?" "Walter Harmon, silver hair, aviator jacket, walks with a slight limp. I extended a personal invitation." The assistant consulted his device. "Not listed in attendance records. We presumed he declined." General Foster studied the auditorium entrances. He remained silent several moments. Then barely audibly, "He's here." Or was. He rose and disappeared into the shadows. Back in the entrance corridor, Walter exhaled slowly. He checked his timepiece. He hadn't arrived to create controversy. He came because of correspondence, memories, commitments. And because the man who'd authored that letter had once been a terrified 19-year-old second lieutenant, sprawled in a drainage ditch halfway across the globe, bleeding into desert sand, whispering his mother's name, convinced he'd never embrace her again. Walter hadn't spoken extensively then. Words weren't necessary. He simply hoisted the young soldier across his shoulders and walked. Now that young man commanded as a general, while Walter remained just the figure against the wall. Minutes dissolved like morning mist evaporating from stone. Walter Harmon had maintained his position near the Pentagon Visitor Center's side barrier for nearly 40 minutes. He registered no complaint. He barely adjusted his stance. But the chill had infiltrated through the polished tile flooring, climbing his legs, coiling around his knees. The autumn atmosphere circulating through the building's ventilation system carried a bitterness, particularly in secluded corners. Yet he persisted because sometimes maintaining position represented its own form of dignity. A security officer at the corridor's opposite end gave him a prolonged examination. This guard was older than most staff members, silver streaking his temples, eyes fatigued but more perceptive than apparent. He nudged a colleague and remarked quietly, "That gentleman seems familiar." The younger guard responded indifferently, "Probably someone's relative, maybe facility services." The senior guard squinted again. Something stirred within his recollection. A grainy photograph on the Veterans Affairs Clinic bulletin board, a commemorative plaque tucked along an unused corridor, a name, Harmon. But certainty eluded him, and in such environments, uncertainty proved insufficient. So he allowed the moment to pass. Walter contemplated departure. Genuinely. His hips stiffened painfully, and the silence surrounding him wasn't merely cold. It reverberated. But as he shifted slightly, preparing to ease away from his position, his attention caught something just beyond the foyer entrance. A banner mounted prominently above the inner passageway read, Operation Shadow Dust Exhibit, Classified Heroes of the 20th Century. Walter froze completely, his focus locked upon those words as though they had reached backward through time to grasp something buried deep within him. He advanced marginally rightward. The reflective glare on the glass display just beyond the entry doors dissipated, and there it appeared, the tactical map. A detailed military terrain schematic etched onto parchment yellowed through decades. Operational zones, navigational markers, extraction routes. He required no explanatory caption. He recalled every contour, every ravine bend, every escape corridor, every name inscribed along the margins. He needed no exhibition. He had experienced it, 1972, northern Syria. Midnight had just passed when the ambush erupted. They comprised 12 operatives deep within hostile territory. No aerial support, no communications, no contingency options. Their mission parameters seemed straightforward. Locate and secure a rogue weapons scientist concealed within a remote canyon installation. But field operations rarely maintain simplicity, not for extended durations. Halfway through the gorge, extraction coordinates became compromised. Gunfire erupted from both elevated ridgelines. Screams, shrapnel, disorienting flash grenades that illuminated the interior of Walter's skull. He commanded the operation. Lieutenant Colonel Walter Harmon directing an elite tactical unit whose personnel never appeared on official documentation. Names still non-existent within governmental archives. Their presence wasn't authorized, which meant their deaths couldn't be acknowledged either. He recalled seeking cover behind fractured boulder formations, retrieving the tactical radio from a fallen communications specialist, attempting to contact aerial support that wouldn't materialize. Then he heard it, an agonized cry. Sharp, terrified, he pivoted and observed him. Private First Class Raymond Foster, young, barely 20, hemorrhaging heavily from an abdominal injury, trapped near the extraction marker, trembling and semi-conscious. Walter never hesitated. He charged through exposed terrain, seized the young soldier by his tactical vest, dragged him across jagged terrain, absorbed a bullet through his boot edge, and maintained momentum. He pulled Foster into the fallback trench, pressed a field tourniquet into the recruit's quivering hands, and instructed through clenched teeth, "Apply pressure here. Don't raise your head and don't cease breathing." He maintained defensive positions for 3 additional hours, then extracted all 12 personnel. Only 3 remained ambulatory. He physically carried 2 casualties himself. He never submitted a medical recommendation. No post-mission debriefing occurred. No public documentation of the operation existed. Only dust and silence. Returning to present awareness, Walter dispelled memories like someone brushing snowflakes from their shoulders. The glass display confronted him. They had documented Operation Shadow Dust, now safely sanitized. Years following declassification, purged of terror and bloodshed and frigid nights when sleep remained elusive because nightmares claimed lives. And while names remained redacted, the narrative persisted. But the operators remained phantoms. Behind him, a gentle voice penetrated his thoughts. "Sir, are you disoriented?" Walter turned slightly. The administrative assistant from earlier approached, Sophia Martinez, advancing cautiously, respectfully. Not condescending, not performative, simply human. "You've maintained this position quite some time," she observed softly. "May I assist you in locating someone?" Walter offered a faint smile. "Simply waiting." Sophia noticed the correspondence in his grasp. "Is that an invitation?" Walter acknowledged affirmatively. She tilted her head. I don't recall seeing your credentials listed. But before she completed her statement, a uniformed officer approached briskly from behind. Young, ambitious, confident. Overconfident in all inappropriate aspects. Martinez, he stated curtly. This gentleman requires no assistance. He's with maintenance personnel. Sophia frowned. He possesses correspondence bearing General Foster's signature. Irrelevant, the officer interrupted dismissively. He lacks proper credentials. Security has addressed this. You have responsibilities. Let's proceed. Sophia hesitated. The officer departed without further acknowledgement. Walter remained silent. He simply offered Sophia a subtle nod. Everything's acceptable, ma'am. But circumstances weren't acceptable. Inside the auditorium, proceedings advanced. Sequential speakers, tributes, appreciative applause. A young captain delivered prepared remarks regarding innovation and valor. A colonel accepted recognition on behalf of his command, yet General Foster remained conspicuously absent from the chamber. Backstage, his assistant checked his communications device anxiously. Sophia stood nearby, attention alternating between the hallway and entrance doors. She couldn't dismiss the sensation in her chest, the quality of the elderly man's voice, weathered, seasoned, but grounded, like someone who had shouldered tremendous burdens for excessive durations, eventually accommodating their weight. Back within the corridor, Walter released a measured breath. He examined the envelope again. It never specified distinguished guest, never guaranteed reserved seating or security clearance. It simply stated, I would be honored by your presence. Perhaps such sentiments held no contemporary significance. Perhaps the author had progressed beyond such considerations. People frequently do. But Walter hadn't attended for personal recognition. He arrived because something within him needed confirmation. Did today's military still value men of his character? Men who never spoke publicly, never authored memoirs, never sought acknowledgement. Simply men who once extracted comrades from blazing canyons without subsequent commentary. He prepared to withdraw. He had reconciled with invisibility, always had. But then the entrances at the corridor's terminus parted and everything transformed. Musical accompaniment faded. Illumination dimmed and General Raymond Foster strode onto the platform. He moved with the bearing acquired through 4 decades of military service. Not rigid, not imperious, simply resolute. Every movement deliberate, every glance purposeful. The audience momentarily stood with courteous applause. He acknowledged with a respectful nod. No theatrical gestures, no performative smile, proceeding directly to the platform's center. Behind him, a massive banner descended from the ceiling. Emerging Military Leadership Recognition Ceremony. An assembly of decorated officers, civilian dignitaries, international attachés, and uniformed cadets filled the auditorium. But General Foster wasn't observing them. He searched for someone else. His gaze swept across the front row, then the second, then toward the rear. His expression remained unchanged, but something in his posture shifted. A momentary pause, concern briefly furrowing his brow. He rotated slightly, addressing no specific individual. Where is he? He retreated from the podium, eyes narrowing. Then he gestured sharply toward an aide positioned near the side curtain. A young lieutenant approached quickly. Sir? Foster's voice remained controlled, measured, but beneath it an unmistakable intensity. An elderly gentleman should be present. Silver hair, aviator jacket, slight limp. He represents my purpose for attending. The aide appeared startled, caught unprepared. Name, sir? Walter Harmon. The aide consulted his tablet, typing frantically. No individual under that designation received formal credentials, no clearance issued, no seating assignment, nothing registered. Foster's expression hardened. Verify with security. Yes, sir. The aide retreated, whispered into his communications device. Moments passed before he returned, visibly uncomfortable. Sir, security reports an individual matching that description was intercepted near the southern entrance. No identification, dressed informally. He hesitated, then added, they presumed he belonged to building services. Foster's gaze locked onto him. He maintained silence, unwavering. Then, with methodical precision, he retrieved his encrypted governmental communications device from his uniform's interior pocket. He turned away from the platform, initiated contact. The assembly continued normally, yet everything had fundamentally shifted. His call connected directly to the Directorate of Military Honors and Records within the Pentagon, an internal division responsible for oversight of classified personnel recognitions and clearances. The connection established instantly. "This is General Foster," he stated evenly. "I require immediate clearance authorization. Override Priority 1. Walter Harmon, Complete Recognition Protocol." A pause. "Affirmative. Lieutenant Colonel retired. Affirmative. Operation Shadow Dust. He received clearance through personal invitation. Security denied entry." Another pause. "Negative. I'm not requesting implementation. I'm activating it. Effective immediately. Issue digital validation, broadcast to all auditorium control stations, and suspend proceedings. I'm retrieving him personally." He terminated the connection. Within the auditorium, the Master of Ceremonies announced the subsequent honoree. A young naval officer stood to accept recognition. General Foster didn't hesitate. He descended from the platform, proceeded purposefully along the side corridor, and advanced directly toward the exit. His aide attempted to follow. Foster dismissed him with a gesture. "I stated my intentions. I'm proceeding alone." At the southern entrance, the breeze had intensified. Walter Harmon prepared for departure. The discomfort in his hip had intensified, and the hollow sensation in his chest now outweighed any combat burden he'd ever shouldered. He harbored no regrets about attending, but partially regretted his optimism. Just as he oriented toward the exit, the outer doors parted behind him. Footsteps resonated, rapid, authoritative. Then a commanding voice. "Colonel Harmon!" Walter turned. There he stood, General Raymond Foster. No microphone, no cameras, no entourage, simply himself. And his expression wasn't ceremonial or formal. It reflected something transcending rank or protocol. It conveyed the recognition of a man who had been extracted from a blazing canyon and never forgotten the strength that carried him to safety. "Sir," Foster addressed him, halting before him, "your presence was expected inside." Walter remained silent. He lacked appropriate response. Foster straightened his posture. Then, without preamble, he raised his right hand in a flawless military salute. There in the corridor with personnel observing, the checkpoint officer frozen in astonishment. Nearby junior officers stood speechless. Walter, caught unprepared, stood taller than he had in years and returned the salute. His hand trembled slightly, but the gesture remained precise, unmistakable. Foster lowered his hand. "I invited you to participate in this ceremony," he said quietly. "Not as an observer, as its fundamental inspiration." Walter appeared confused. "Sir?" Foster interrupted. "I owe you more than verbal acknowledgement. Accompany me." He pivoted, held the entrance open. Walter hesitated briefly, then followed. Inside the auditorium, whispers rippled across the assembly. Communication devices vibrated. Aides murmured to their superiors. Then the rear entrances opened fully and every head turned. General Foster proceeded down the central aisle, not alone. Beside him walked an elderly gentleman in an aviator jacket, shoulders squared, chin elevated, gaze unwavering. Whispers ceased. The Master of Ceremonies faltered mid-sentence. A colonel, partially through applause, remained motionless. General Foster remounted the platform, guiding Walter gently beside him. He approached the microphone, disregarded prepared remarks, ignored protocol greetings, didn't reintroduce himself. He simply surveyed the assembled faces and declared, "Before continuing this program, I must rectify something. Something that should never have transpired within these walls." He glanced toward Walter, then addressed the audience. "This man standing beside me is Lieutenant Colonel Walter Harmon, retired, United States Army Special Operations, 1971 through 1986, recipient of multiple classified commendations, commander of Task Force Shadow Dust." Audible gasps erupted. One officer's jaw visibly dropped. A young Marine instinctively stood at attention, then self-consciously resumed his seat. General Foster continued, "In 1972, I was a 19-year-old private. I lay wounded, hemorrhaging, pinned under hostile fire without communications, without cover, without prospects. This man extracted me, carried 2 additional casualties while sustaining injuries himself, then refused evacuation until all 12 of his operatives received medical attention." He regarded Walter again. His voice wavered momentarily. "He preserved my life, and today we left him standing outside this auditorium. No movement, no sound throughout the chamber." Foster composed himself. "I requested his attendants to officially acknowledge that the military I serve today still honors those who never sought recognition." He stepped aside, turned toward Walter. "Sir, would you honor us by assuming your rightful position on this platform?" Walter surveyed the assembly. He perceived no judgment. He observed faces, human, youthful, appreciative. He nodded once, advanced a single step, then another. The master of ceremonies, visibly emotional, approached the podium again, cleared his throat. "I believe, distinguished guests, we have identified our primary honoree for tonight's ceremony." Applause erupted, initially subdued, then swelling progressively until the Pentagon auditorium's very foundations trembled. Not from authority, but from recognition. In our darkest moments, compassion always discovers a path, often in the quietest places. Not everyone offering assistance seeks acknowledgement. Some merely need assurance that today someone isn't suffering alone. And sometimes that singular confirmation transforms a life completely. You may forget this narrative, but without retelling, history remains forever silent. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe for more powerful stories.